Hi guys, Melinda with Primrose and Pearl Bath Products here, and I got a special request on a video on how to make these embeds. They were also seen on this soap from the Feelings collection. That was the Core Memories soap. And they're just little like gumball, gumdrop embeds. So what I use for these is Melt and Pour soap. The one I typically use is from Wholesale Supplies Plus. It's their Crafter's Choice brand, and the ones that I have on hand right now are the clear and the 3 butter, which has shea butter, I don't know, 2 other butters that I can't remember off the top of my head. Also has titanium dioxide in it, which is what gives it that white color. All the ones that I use are the detergent free ones, since I'm only using them for embeds and not for the whole soap, and also because I like a more gentle soap, so I stick with the detergent free. Now the mold I use is this 9 spot gumball mold. I got mine off Temu, however we're saying it, and it's a silicone mold. It comes with the lid, but I never use the lid. You're not limited to just that type of mold either. I have used fondant molds I also got from Temu. Here you see I've got some sunflowers and some snowflakes and some leaves. And then I've also used molds for chocolate making. So I've got these stars, I've got these hearts that I've used before, I've got roses that I've used, gosh, a couple of times. And all of those just came from Walmart. They weren't anything fancy. The most important part is that they are that silicone that's flexible, so you can push your soap embed back out when it is ready to use. Sometimes the fondant ones get a little bit tricky just because they are so much more intricate. You really have to make sure that you're getting it into all the little cracks and crevices so that you don't end up with air bubbles. You can see from that close-up there all the little details on it. Sometimes they're also a little bit harder to pop out, like on this snowflake one, but overall I've had really good luck with them and they add a nice touch. Another option is to use a silicone ice cube tray. They come in tons of different fun shapes now. Again, the most important thing is to make sure that they're flexible so you can pop that soap back out when it is ready. I used this lemon one you'll see on the fresh lemon bar soap that I made for the spring. I just put it right on the top as a cute little accent, and I think it turned out really nice. Okay, so on to the Melt and Pour soap. When you get Melt and Pour soap, it will come in a package, and when they make it, it basically gets poured into the package to solidify and then be sold and shipped from there. So it needs to be taken out of the package and cut into whatever size pieces you are going to be melting it down as. I like this one that has the little divider lines. It just helps give me a starting gauge for how much I'm taking out. The most important thing is when you're cutting up the Melt and Pour soap to make sure that your pieces are the same size so that they melt at the same rate. If you've got some pieces that are really big and some pieces that are really small, the pieces that are really small will melt first before the big pieces, and you might end up with some spots that boil. And when your Melt and Pour soap boils, it's kind of not good anymore. It stinks so bad. The first time I ever used Melt and Pour soap, I burned the frickin' daylight out of it, and the smell was awful and the soap was unusable. So even pieces will help to prevent that. Here you can see I've had my Melt and Pour in the microwave for about 10 seconds and it wasn't all the way melted, so I left it in to melt the rest of the way. When you put your Melt and Pour soap in the microwave, you want to put it in for about 30-second increments at 50% power or less. You don't want to just stick it in at full power. It's going to fry your Melt and Pour and it's not going to come out nicely. Once it's all nice and melted down, it is time to add the colorant, and if you're adding fragrance, to add fragrance. I don't often add fragrance to the embed portion because it's such a small portion of the soap. And if I end up having extra embeds, I can either use it on a different soap or I can remelt it and use it as something else so I'm not wasting anything. I like to pour my melt and pour soap into the mold when it's not too hot. I have found that 130 degrees or below, or really even like 110 or below, is ideal for me. I think when the melt and pour is too hot and you go to pour it, sometimes that mica, especially if it's a larger micron size, will settle at the bottom of the mold, and then you don't get even coloring throughout. Another thing I like to do, you just saw me spritz some isopropyl alcohol before I even pour it. And what that will do is get rid of any of the surface bubbles before I pour anything into any molds. That will help so that I'm not putting bubbles right into the mold itself. Once you've done all that, you're ready to pour it into your mold. I try to be careful, but honestly, if you spill a little bit, it's not a big deal because it's super easy to clean up any of the overspill from the melt and pour soap. Now, you might have noticed I didn't really measure specifically the mica that I put into the melt and pour. I don't usually. I use a popsicle stick because then I can use it to mix right away, and I measure with my heart. The more mica you add, the more opaque your soap is going to be, especially when you're using the clear base to begin with. If you only add a little bit of mica, it's going to be much more translucent versus a lot of mica is going to be opaque. The only caveat to that is if you add too much mica, you will end up with the mica coloring the bubbles, and that can be off-putting to some people. So just be cautious with how much you're using. You might need to test a little bit depending on your colorant and the look that you're going for. Now I poured some into those fondant molds just so you can kind of see, and now I'm going over the top again with the isopropyl alcohol. And just so you guys can see the contrast between using a melt and pour for embeds and using cold process soap for embeds, I am testing a new recipe anyway and thought I would throw some into the same gumball mold so that you could see the difference, how it comes out between the melt and pour and the cold process. And don't worry, none of the extra is going to go to waste. This is a new recipe I'm trying to test. I'm trying to see if I can shift away from using olive oil and cocoa butter. If you are a soap maker or even somebody that cooks in the kitchen a lot with those ingredients, you may have noticed how much the prices of those things have skyrocketed. So I'm trying to see what I can do to maybe get around that a little bit. All right, I have everything poured now. The biggest difference between using the melt and pour like you see over here and the cold process is that this melt and pour is going to set up very quickly. You can see the top of this little embed is already, I wouldn't call it solid, but it is starting to solidify. It's not quite liquid anymore. These will set up, depending on the size of your embed, in anywhere from 20 minutes to overnight, whereas the cold process will still have to sit the 18 to 24 hours to go through saponification. Okay, it is the next day. I figured I would just wait and unmold everything all at the same time. First, I'm going to unmold the melt and pour, and it pops out super easy, and it looks just like that when it's done. It's round on almost all sides. It just got a little flat spot where you pour it in, but I just use that and put it, down into the soap, and you would never see it in the end product. Everything pops out super easily because of the silicone mold, sometimes a little too easily. The only thing I'll say, and maybe this is just the silicone molds that I have, but they're kind of a matte finish when they come out. Sometimes you can kind of shine them up using a steamer. Sometimes I just might take a little isopropyl alcohol and see if I can shine them up. So I don't know if a different mold, they would just come out shiny, because I know different silicones sometimes have different finishes. Here is the cold process. Not too difficult to pop out. Again, it comes out pretty easily. The one thing I will say is that because it has not fully hardened yet, you can see it ends up sometimes with a flat spot from where you've tried to pop it out. whereas the melt and pour is completely solid and you don't ever get that flat spot unless you've tried to demold it when it was still too warm. You can try and get around that by being a little more gentle. I was kind of purposely aggressive on that one to show you how it can flatten out. So that is another difference between using the cold process soap versus the melt and pour soap for embeds. Next, I am going to unmold the little snowflake fondant ones. When you are unmolding melt and pour on something this thin, you do have to be a little bit careful because they can still bend. And if you bend them, maybe you're not going to have the look you want, or they're not going to fit the way that you wanted to. So just be careful unmolding them. And I like to let them sit for another day before I go ahead and use them. That gives them time to finish solidifying or hardening, whatever you want to call it. One last thing, a touch that I like to add sometimes is to add some sparkle to the top, depending on what the embeds are for. I just have this little airless pump from Nurture Soap that I use, and I think I've got sparkle plenty inside of there. Don't quote me on that, but if you really, really want to know which one this is, ask me in the comments and I'll go back and I will look it up for you. I think that the sparkle really sticks well to the melt and pour. You can see the difference here between the one on the left that doesn't have the sparkle and the one on the right that does have the sparkle. I hope you guys learned a lot today about embeds. Please let me know if you would like to see more videos like this in the future. I am so happy to make more educational videos. Thanks for watching.